Thank you for coming. We wanted to talk a bit about what happened in the last 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, when we voted on all the shortlisted entries. We have here 4 of the jury members, all white, tall men, which is not the normal composition of the jury. We do have a very diverse group from all countries, basically all countries in the region, also advertisers. I think we were 7 advertisers and agencies. We also had a creative agency representative with us and one from Millward Brown from research. Let me just ask some questions. I know we only have 15 minutes, so if you have questions, ask them anytime. Unless I see a hand, I keep going, but I have my list of questions here. The first question to Andrew, who has been the president of the jury this time. By the way, I'm Bernhard Glock. I'm what they tell me, I'm the emeritus chairman, whatever that means. But I accompany all award shows around the world for the Festival of Media. So in Miami, in Montreux, or now in Rome for the Global Awards, and now here also in Singapore. So I'm the one who delivers continuity, can answer the tough questions, and can a bit look across all the awards, what happens there. So Andrew, how did the judging actually work?
Well, you actually left me with an easy one. We had 19 people sitting in a room with a great view, and then we pulled the curtains down so we couldn't see anything but the submission films and read the submission entries. We reviewed the films for each particular category, the shortlisted films, and then went through a debate process, leveraging the information that was in the written submission as well. Usually the debate was fairly robust, typically focusing on the ones that we felt were standout, but in most instances we debated all entries and then went through a process of actually raising hands to vote on the ones that we felt were strongest, and then as a result of that, a single vote for the category winner.
How would you judge the overall quality
of the work?
Yes.
I thought the work was really solid. I mean, this is the second year that I've judged at FOMA. It's a very different judging experience to doing some of the other award shows. I really like the focus on media. I think we really need to elevate the conversation around media much more than we typically do. I thought there were some really interesting ideas coming through, a lot of new thinking, and particularly the emerging categories. I thought the entries were a lot stronger this year, so it was a really positive experience.
You mentioned emerging categories. Adrian, we had 3 new ones. Let me see. Consumer research was a new category. Best launch was a new category, and data innovation was a new category. When you look at those new categories, did anything spark your mind on those?
Yeah, I thought the consumer research was interesting because we had 4 that we looked at, and there were 2 very different. 2 were more on the technical new ways to do research, and 2 were the use of research. So for me, that was interesting.
So worthwhile to have the new categories in there.
Yes,
okay.
Definitely.
Peter, any trends you have seen? Anything emerging you have seen?
Thank you very much. You want to record me? Yeah, we were short on mics. Emerging, I think, in terms of emerging trends, look, I think the best work that came through in the time we've got here for the questions we have was really the stuff that was clearly, rooted in good insight, that actually connected well with the brand, and so worked at that level. I think some of the best stuff that I saw that come through was in areas you wouldn't quite expect, in areas like B2B and so on, was very interesting, and also quite small budget stuff. We talked about that quite a lot in terms of not having sight of budgets and most of this stuff, but there was clearly some stuff in there that was quite small spend, but really, really innovative work.
Perfect. Andrew, when you look at the various submissions from the various countries, anything that came out of that? Anything that stood out?
You should have asked Pete this one because he was doing the tally by country. Yeah, look, I mean, there's obviously a difference in the entry standards between some of the markets. However, I think to Pete's point, if the work's strong enough and you spend the time crafting the entry, a good award will actually, a good piece of work will actually rise to the top. So, just because, a market like Australia will typically spend more on the submission process than a market like Malaysia or potentially India, didn't mean that there was a skew to one particular market over another. I think the best ideas and the best work definitely won.
Perfect. Adrian, what do you think were the best categories where you have seen the best work? And Peter, you can get ready for that. I will ask you then the opposite. Where would we see opportunities? So Adrian, the best ones, and then Peter, where we will see opportunities.
Well, I didn't feel there was a weak category, to be honest. I mean, day and a half of judging, and we had, as Andrew said, there was strong debate on almost every category. I mean, I was in media 20 years ago when none of us used to talk about numbers at all. So what I found encouraging was everything we saw, people had given some very robust numbers and the effectiveness of the campaigns. It wasn't just nice to do stuff. So I'd say the effectiveness award was probably the hardest one.
20 years ago, we did talk about numbers, just the price of everything. So now I think there was one category that stands out. We did talk about it. It was the fact that the contribution from, dare to say it, from the publishers, from the media owners in terms of their contribution to what we did wasn't the best. We kind of struggled with that area a little bit, but obviously most of the agency submissions were all very, very high standard. We ran over both days. We spent a lot of time talking about them. But we found some clear winners in those categories, but that was the week of worker area.
All right. Well, some observations from my side. There was a question. Sure, questions always have priority. I stopped talking.
Yeah, I'm a PR director here, so I look after our entries. I was just, I guess, interested to understand how you judge the results. Because if you look at China, you always have these huge numbers, but it's very hard to know if the campaign really worked or not, unless you have the context.
Well, results, basically, we have four basic criteria: insights, strategy, execution, results. So results is always about 25%, except in the effectiveness award, where results are 50 or 40%. 40%, right? And to be honest, I have always looked at each submission and looked at the results, sometimes first. Where there were no results, we basically discarded it. Where we can be better in, and we are talking this right after the awards, after the festival, can we better categorize and format the results page so we can have an easier look at the results versus sometimes results were all over the place.
I just build on that. We're very mindful of that in terms of areas like India and China and very, very large numbers. So we went through in great detail to make sure that didn't sway us. And actually, I can't give any, obviously, winners away, but there's some really, really good examples of examples that came through that were working on small budgets, were working on small results, but just were very, very effective in the means in which they went to market.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I keep talking. All right, two observations.
While I have the
oh,
mic,
another
I will
one.
ask another one. Okay, I don't know if you have an answer for that, but often when I talk to my team, they are like, okay, this is important, and then the entry is huge, and I feel we don't really get to the instance of the entry. So if you had to give me a tip to go back to my team and say, okay, you have to cut your entry by 50% and just keep what's essential, what should I tell them to convince them that that's the way to go?
I'd start with the basic hygiene. So really evaluating the category criteria and determining if the entry is appropriate for that particular category. We did have a couple of examples of really good work that was just misentered. And I mean, that's a waste of time, energy and money. Secondly, whilst it is time consuming to actually craft the submission for each category, there was one example that will do well tomorrow night that we saw a distinctly different submission, both written and video, that really made that piece of work sort of pop in that particular category entry. I think the third thing is when, the submission guidelines say a 2-minute film, make it a 2-minute film, not ramble on. And, let's be honest, with 138, I think, submissions, that's a hell of a lot of film at 2 minutes if you just sort of do the math. Really thinking about the essence of how to communicate, what is the core idea that you're trying to get across is absolutely critical. Basic communications 101. It's what we do every day in our lives, and yet we don't apply that necessarily when we go through the awards process. So, the old David Ogilvy quote, "The consumer's not a moron, she's your mother." or she's your wife, run it past somebody who's not in the industry and see if they understand what the hell you're talking about, because that would actually be a good litmus test.
I'd say less is more a little bit in terms of what you put together. There were a couple of examples. We got of videos that were just PowerPoint, and they were just a simple voiceover, quite well and simply animated. It just had the really salient points in it, and they were still as good as something with 10 times that kind of production budget to make a video.
If you put yourselves in our shoes, as Andrew said, we're sitting there for a day and a half with 138 films, and that's the short list. But we're looking for what was the insight, how did you execute it, and what were the results, all right? So if you make the life easier for us, then we'll make it easier for you.
There's a question, yeah?
Yeah, if there was one overarching theme for this year, just one word from each of you, what would it be?
Yeah, I'd like to see my
That's more
media
than one
agency, OMD, submit more. Particularly for
9,
us.
12.
Yeah, but one word, more. No, better.
I think it was the fact that, again, if I go back in my career, digital was always added on, and now it's at the core. So everything we saw was very well integrated, and people have finally got the message that marketing is everything you do, not just a little bit.
You know what you were saying about the video entries? Same kind of thing. One word, Pete. Is it possible for you? Come back tomorrow.
Activated is the word.
I would say good bench strength. I think the first time I have seen, at least 2 words, the first time I have seen in many awards that we had a winner in every single category, plus we had choices in every single category. And sometimes, and even here in Asia last year, I think it was mobile which wasn't too good, and this year was really nice. But sometimes we're really struggling internationally to find one winner where we all stand behind it, and I have seen this here in Singapore this time, which is very good. Any other questions from the audience? Here's one.
Thank you, Bernhard. Given you've had a chance to see a lot of work, and as experts yourself for a number of years, did the work that you saw, did it encourage you that standards per se, irrespective of the quality of the entries, but the standard of work that's actually being done is definitely moving in the right direction, is definitely going up? Because there's obviously there's often a difference between the quality of an entry and the actual work that went on within the business. Is the standard actually going up anyway?
I would say yes. And having done a couple of these, not one of this size before, but having a couple of these before, yes, the standard is improving. You see it, and it's not just as you'd expect from the submissions coming out of areas like Australia, for example. It's across the board. And, I think that they were generally higher than what I've seen a couple of years ago, yes. And particularly, there's a lot of emotion in the submissions from, obviously, Thailand and India and those ones. They sort of really focused on that, and they were very, very, very pertinent.
I just got a hand warning that we should be closing fast. I say something, then you, and if you still have a minute, last round. You can see all the shortlisted work on the Microsoft pads out there. I encourage you to do it. It's really good to see great work and scroll through. The question here?
Okay, in terms of the results, the weightage you were saying is 25%, right? The results of the campaign. Now, in case of digital or taking the integrated view, it's very difficult to get the ROI, the results, cross-screen. That a campaign has worked on mobile, on web, so getting a cross-screen ROI is difficult. So in that scenario, how did you measure the impact of the integrated thing on the brand parameters?
Well, we don't measure it. We take the submissions as they come in and look at it. And if the data are convincing, we trust them, to be honest. We have to. We cannot go further. Most of the time, most of the time, it's really more than half of the submissions have weak results. Weak data, weak results.
Yeah. So what are the ways to then check it out properly? Because it's somebody saying these results, but it's not on an integrated view in terms of this is the effect on brand parameters of the campaign. So whatever best available, go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're asking an industry-wide big question, which is how we look at multi-platforms and measure them all together, whether it's reach, frequency, connectivity, what it might be. In the case of most of the entries, they had different types of metrics to measure success, even within category. So it's not apples with apples in most cases. But the results they gave, we have to trust them, and they have also been, ratified, I guess, before they get to our stage. But it's part of the submission. So we're looking at just under its own merits of what happened.
Right. Are we good?
Hi, Bernhard. Actually, I wasn't giving you the wave that we had to wrap. I actually had a question for a change. No.
We're still good. I'm enjoying this.
Just a quick one. And apologies if this was answered before I came in. But, we were just talking outside about some of the things that our guest from UM was saying about storytelling and, being out there and authentic and all of those things. But in truth, isn't it the case that we can, as marketers, we can only be as good as our clients let us be? And that in some cases, they're spying on you. In some cases, the marketers simply don't want you to push the envelope and be all out creative and really make that different campaign. So I'd be interested to know from the judges whether you have had a sense that the applications that you received were client restrained, that they could have in fact gone further, if only here in Asia in particular, the clients might have been a little bit more foresightful.
I'd make one comment on that. I don't think you have to be out of the box, or what we're looking for is effectiveness. And some of the ideas we saw were very old ideas that have been nicely executed in a fresh way. So that's one thing I'd say. The other thing is you get the client you deserve, right? And so if you're not, as an ex-client, right, I would put the emphasis on the agency to push me, and if they don't, then that's their fault.
There were a couple of entries that probably could have gone to another level, but I don't think it was the client necessarily that would have pulled them back on that. It's possibly the thinking in the agency team. I don't know that, but it's a position I would take. Speaking as a client, as I am now, I'd never ever constrain my agency in any way, shape or form in creativity of media work. Yeah, but we weren't on the panel. It's just the ones that could turn up today.
No, look, I'd say in general, the quality of the work is absolutely defined by what the client is prepared to brief and what the client is prepared to buy, and their appetite for risk. It also needs to be countered by the agency understanding, what the client's actually having to address as part of their core business and making sure that it delivers on that. I think in an award show, you're less likely to see work that has been pulled back because it's the stuff that has floated to the top. For me, it's actually the measure of the body of work that a brand actually puts in the market every day that is probably the best measure of whether the client's actually sort of briefing and buying the sort of work that is game-changing. So, I kind of have a counterpoint of view. I do try and take the agency's point of view, certainly within my organisation, because we can be so much better if we're prepared to be open to it.
Any other questions from the audience? John?
Just curious about the pace of innovation for those of you who have judged over many years. How quickly is yesterday's innovation becoming today's hygiene, and how do you sort of factor that in the judging process?
Let me give you one example, then pass it on to you guys. Last year, I think it was last year, I was disappointed by the entries in the mobile category. This year, I was very pleased with the entries in the mobile category. However, this year, I was a bit disappointed by the entries in the social category. It's not just, it was more the bench strength, the missing bench strength in that category. I bet next year we will be pleased here. So I think it takes some time that we get into the new space with great examples, plus more great examples where we can choose from. However, I also heard that there is great work in the social space here in Asia. It just hasn't been submitted. So one of my calls to action is, in these new areas, in the new categories we have opened, put cases in, your great cases, and don't let them work nicely in the countries, but put them out into the public area so we can judge it and they get the awards they deserve.
think it's a good question. There was a couple of examples I can think of where the panel judging had quite a lot of digital expertise on it. Myself and Sean and a few others, we vetted a few things on there that actually you see and you think, well, that's quite smart the way it was done, but we were doing it 5 and 6 years ago, really. So it was kind of the more innovative stuff that we were after, and there was that coming through, to be fair. So we kind of looked at that level and said, has this been done before, even in a slightly different way? And is it more than 3 or 4 years old in its thinking? And there was a couple of examples that shone through that did that we then therefore discounted.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we've got to wrap. Yeah, the only thing I would add is, for me, it was less about the innovation per se. It was more about when the innovation got out of the way of the idea, where the technology became invisible and the idea, became much more evident. I think that's where you got to a much stronger position versus, an idea presented, on the basis of what technology was being used, and that made for a much stronger entry.
All right. A final question to each of my folks to the right side. What would be your tip, your key tip from this audience side on the right side? I'm thinking consumer focus, right? We heard it just before. What would be your single tip you would leave the audience with to win an award next year?
Go out and look at all the films, see which categories were weak and go hard on those ones. That's an easy way to improve your agency performance. No, actually just taking the time to understand the categories and looking through the body of work that your respective agencies have to submit and going for it. I would say there's some really low-hanging fruit for agencies that really want to dominate this festival, and I think the festival would benefit from more quality work being submitted.
I would say make sure you're in the right category. There were some campaigns that we really wanted to award, but they were just submitted under the wrong category. You decide. I mean, there's 19 or something different categories, so there's plenty of choice, but you need to be in the right one because we can't move it.
Don't need to spend lots of money on production for a video. Just make it really, really clear, the salient points, and just bring out that clear insight and explain, how that connected to the brand and how it was executed. It doesn't need to be a 3-minute long video with oodles and oodles of different stats in it at all. In fact, that will weigh against you.
And for me would be read the category description carefully and deliver on this. Too often we have seen cases which just didn't deliver simply on the category definition. All right, I think we are through. I say thank you very much. Back to the audience. Thank you.